actually had, most people don't realize it, but when they were clearing the way, they had pioneer units that went through and cleared all the trees off. They would go through and they would put the George Rex on the tree. Don't touch that tree because that belongs to the crown.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, how do you think they get all those tall trees?
Because they left them there.
Exactly. So there was a lot of things that most people that get left out of the equation. But they were in a very, very formidable fighting force. The British Army was. Just like anything else, we were, millions of miles away from supplies. So we were only as good as our supplies.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that, of course, you're fighting the adversaries here in their own backyard, and they knew where to hide, and they were good at that. And that's really, the Rev War was really the start of guerrilla warfare.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't realize that. If you ever watched the movie The Patriot,
yes.
Okay,
yes.
that was very indicative of what they
that's
did.
A great
yeah,
movie,
because they stole from the crown. How do you think we got everything?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what they did.
Okay, so you were explaining what these items were?
Yeah, so I portray a 18th century Revolutionary War soldier. I'm with His Majesty King George.
All right.
We're the first Foot Guards. We landed here in New York in 1778. And this would be very indicative of what accoutrements that a soldier would carry in his backpack on campaign in the colonies.
Okay, I don't recognize some of these items here.
Okay, so this would be indicative of a sewing kit that a soldier might carry. Sometimes it's leather, sometimes they're cloth. My wife does have a cloth one.
Did they call them a housewife at that point, or was that a later term?
Well, housewife was actually developed during the Civil War.
Okay.
That term is very loosely used because most guys during the French and Indian War and Revolutionary War would seek out a woman that was well dressed because that meant she could sew. Okay, and not so much that she could sew, but hopefully she could cook. So those were two of the major characteristics of what somebody would look for, as how well she was dressed. She would carry pockets. Pockets are these things right here. If they were very ornately done, that would tell me that this woman knows how to sew, which is going to benefit me because when my coat gets ripped, guess who's sewing it? So, a lot of things were done based on priority. Okay, sewing is a major priority. So, most soldiers, I portray a sergeant major, so there are some things on this table that I do have based on rank, but a typical soldier may not have a sewing kit. You may have one sewing kit between 5 or 7 guys, and they would share it and use it. And you would use it to sew your backpack, your haversack, anything that you would need to sew, because remember, we're on campaign. There's not a Walmart down the street. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of this stuff was you fended for yourself. Everyone was issued, when we first came here, we were issued bearskin caps. We found out that those were not practical in the wooded colonial United States, so they opted to the light infantry hat that I'm wearing
Where
now.
would that be practical?
Well, that would be the time frame back then. That's how they wore those.
Where they just like in front of Buckingham Palace today, you have a grenadier.
Yeah, but
the watch guard with
it's all for show, though.
Correct, but they were.
Well, let me just tell you something.
Elite.
When you got 35, 40 guys coming at you, 6 foot or taller, with these bearskin hats on and these big muskets, it's a show of force. The grenadiers, most of your grenadiers that wore these bearskin hats, they were a shock and awe unit, and we were designed exactly for what we were used for. Okay, just like in Desert Storm, it was all shock and awe. Okay, that's what they wanted. They wanted to impact the colonials, and most of them, when they seen things and did certain tactics that weren't really, because you got to remember during the war, we were all gentlemen soldiers. Okay, we were men of honor. So a lot of these guys fought with distinction, and there was a lot of things that changed here in the colonies because of the urban warfare that they were in the inner cities, and once they moved out into the wooded areas, it was every man for themselves.
Okay, so what are these other items here, especially those balls with the wicks in them?
So basically, what those are representations of what grenades would look like during the
I was
18th
wondering
century.
about that.
Yeah. So hence
So
the
were
word.
they metal?
Well, some were, yes. Some were made out of lead. Some were made out of ceramic. Some were made out of glass. Some were made out of clay. A lot of it was based on the type of incinerator device that you were using, that we were throwing. But for the most part, you would get greater impact because it creates greater shrapnel if you use lead,
So what is the effective range on that?
as far as I can throw it.
And what's the kill radius?
Depends on what's in it. There's a lot of variables with that.
But ideally,
Ideally, probably within 15 feet
that's,
of
that's
impact
deadly enough.
in the impact zone. Yeah, sure,
Okay.
absolutely. More so the incendiary part of it when they were fighting in urban areas, because everything would catch on fire.
Lovely.
Everything. Well, sure. That was the whole. That was the whole idea.
So other than gunpowder, what would they be loaded with?
Tar.
Tar?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. It
Little
catches
Greek
on
fire action going on.
Absolute
But
betcha. You betcha. All of that stuff.
okay, and I see you have some spectacles.
Yep. So those would have been typical of an 18th century soldier, just like we are now. You reach a certain age, you cannot see correctly, so you would have glasses. Not every soldier carried them. As the rank of sergeant, I carried them because I could afford them. Okay.
And I noticed they're square, they're hexagonal.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They weren't
Probably
all
because it's easier to cut the glass that way.
correct. Okay. There's a lot of misnomers about a lot of stuff.
And that's a tin fire starter kit.
Correct. This is called a tampoon. This would go in the end of my flintlock musket to keep all the rain out.
Okay, that's
Okay, that's how you keep your barrel of your gun. This is my pot scrubber to clean my cooking pots in, and or my rum ration cup. My knife
okay.
and fork. This is a form of hardtack that we would have been issued on campaign. You would heat that up or soak it in your rum.
It was
or-
round.
Or I'm sorry.
It's round.
Mhm.
I
Sure.
always thought they were square.
Well, that's Civil War.
Okay, so
So again, there's just a lot of similarities. Just things change just a touch.
okay.
And then I would
I-
carry my shaving kit. I would have been issued a comb. Most of the stuff, this would have been made out of bone. The toothbrush is made out of bone. Bone handles on your fork and knife set.
And what's this guy?
So that's an example of a round of ammunition that.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yep. So
The
basically,
diameter's too small, isn't it?
what's that?
The diameter's wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, on this particular this particular one, yes. This is actually for like a Lancaster. This is a 45 caliber.
Okay, and you're
But
69, aren't you?
No, we're 75.
75.
French are 69. Some of your
Okay.
carbines are 69, but most of the standard in the British Army was 75 caliber.
Okay.
That's the Brown Bess, yes. And they did that so everything's universal. What you got, when you die, I'm taking your shit.
Well, it's practical that way.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And what's this pipe? And is this a notepad or
So
what
that
is
would be a
this?
journal. That would be my pencil.
And what are those pages made out of? They look fabric.
Correct. They didn't always have parchment paper, so you would have used what you could. See, you got to remember, you know how your day starts off, and sometimes you have to adapt and improvise.
Okay.
Well, you got to know that they did the same thing back then. Okay, they just didn't look at it and go, well, you know what, Walmart's not open yet, so they
Okay.
made things work for them.
So
and
so
they
how
were
do you
very
so how do you
practical.
make a fabric book bound in leather? And how do you write on it once you've got it?
Well, it can be done.
Okay. I've never heard of that.
Hmm. And there is documents that indicate that.
So is that cotton or linen or what is
Linen,
that?
yes.
Linen.
Yep.
Okay. That's hard enough to make. I mean,
That's a personal journal, and keep in mind again, you know, as a sergeant major, there are some privileges that I do have that most soldiers of, say, a private would
Yeah.
not have. Like I would carry a frying pan, So I would actually have my own little small grill where I could grill my own, like a brazier where I could cook. If I shot a rabbit or a squirrel or something, I could cook my own, be my own entity. Hence the soldier spots. Each soldier would have had one. You wouldn't have necessarily had a cup because you had your canteen. You drink right from your canteen. Most soldiers,
And that is the way the canteens were then. They were metal, not wood.
no, they were wood. We were issued tin during the
Tin.
Revolutionary War. Wood was a lot harder to maintain, but wood would have had a wax lining in it.
Okay.
Okay, beeswax, anything of that nature like that. So it's just what you would have been issued. The Army found it was easier to maintain those. You got to remember that they're supplying troops. So
Yeah. Guys who may or may not be taking the best care of stuff.
correct. Well, when you're on campaign and
Stuff
Not to-
happens.
right, exactly.
Okay, so what
Out
tools do we
elephants.
so what tools do we have in here?
So basically, what this is right here is this is your this is a
I
small.
recognize a bullet mold.
Exactly, and that's exactly what this is.
Okay, I see flints and balls in there.
Yeah, I just threw some flints. This 75 caliber ball right here.
Okay.
That would be very indicative of what would go into a cartridge round that would be fired from the smooth bore musket, 75 caliber bullet mold. This would be the ladle that you would use. You could actually take a branch or whatever to.
Oh, okay, so it doesn't get so hot.
Exactly. Yep. And or put your glove on. This folds like this because it actually goes into your kit. This is my rifle kit, gun
Okay.
cleaning kit. So it basically goes like that. Goes in there, and then this would be the tool that I would carry. They were finding that the British Army had several, well, actually they had a couple different variations of the tool. This you could put a leather thong on and carry it on either on your gun or off your jacket to change the flints out. These would be indicative of the type of flint that 75 caliber flintlock musket would use, and you would go through these quite a bit.
Yeah.
So. And then basically they would, there is a lot of examples of pliers. Most of your pliers were of this nature.
Needle nose.
Correct.
That looks like a pretty modern plier, actually, except it's missing a wire cutter. Other than that, I could find that in Napa today.
Yeah, I'm not really sure on that. This is actually a copy that a blacksmith made for me of an example from the Smithsonian. Okay. Of what would be indicative of the type of plier that they would use.
So they developed them quite early.
Oh, absolutely. 18th century scissors. You can see there's not much difference.
I've actually have one of those in a sewing machine to trim thread with. It works beautifully.
They're fabulous. The pliers would be more indicative of a sewing kit because they're used to pull the needle through for doing leather work.
Oh, okay.
When you're sewing. So yes, they would have carried them, and they'd have been readily available. You would have carried various different type of threads with you. So either your red jacket blue for your blue facing, you would have sinew, needles, leather needles. I just particular on my housewife kit per se, I chose to go with a leather case, just because I can.
Okay.
But most of the time it would be cloth.
Okay. So what was your name?
My name is Michael.
Hello, Michael. Mind if I upload this to my YouTube?
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you.